Thank you. So we're doing this series, and we're making a, a mood quote application, and we're in the fifth episode of a six-episode series. And this one is APIs and Supabase, which is how your application talks to other services, and how you store data using Supabase, which is a scalable database service. And this is a high-level overview of our application, and it is just a mode quote app, which will give you a quote based on the mode input you provide. And we've made some progress with this app, but it's all local to our computer. We want to interact with APIs and also save it to our database. But before that, I'll just do a quick recap of what we covered last time. Why do we need Git and GitHub, and um, like a free guide for people who couldn't join us last time? They can use the guide to set up GitHub on their project. Um, why we need Git and GitHub is, think of Git as a memory tracker for your project. It's like a Google Docs version history, which is basically for every change that you make, you can track the history of your project. And GitHub is like this remote server where you can store all of your projects. It's like a Google Drive for all your code base. One important thing is to track your progress, and how you do that is making sure your commit messages are very specific, and you build your application in iterations and not in one whole go. Um, how to initialize your Git in your project is, uh, you go to your project folder and run Git init, and that will tell your project folder that we want to use Git for this project and track version control. Git add will um, inform your version control that this is like a staging area for your changes, and we can add it. And git commit would officially save those changes for you, and then git push would push those changes to GitHub. This free guide will actually help you how to do all of this step by step. We covered it last time in our session, but this guide will help you move fast. Um, the learning goals for today is understanding how APIs work. What is the difference between GET and POST requests, which is mostly in modern applications, GET and POST requests are used to retrieve information from a server and post information to a server. And we're going to use an external API source for this project. Currently, the quotes we are using are in our local storage in our code base, but we're going to use Zen quotes to pull it from an API service. We're going to use Supabase, which is a scalable database service for storing data. And then we're going to update our API route to connect our API to our database service. This is a big picture mental model for our web app. Um, so if you look here, um, what's common between the three columns is the fact that API routes is synonymous to like a barista at a coffee shop who you provide information about what kind of coffee you want, and then uh, they prepare our coffee for us and present us the beverage. So the same way for our application, the API route will do the processing and then interact with an external database and then post the output data in our card. So this will be much more clear when we do the demo, but the key thing to remember is that the API route is like an interface between your application and the database. So like I said, it's like a bridge that lets you lets your app speak to another service. So in our case, another service is ZenQuotes and Supabase. And Vercel is a platform that allows us to deploy our applications to a website, and then you can share your website or your project with other people. So Vercel is what we're going to use to deploy and which will be used in the next session. But today we're going to use Supabase and API. So before we move forward, I wanted to quickly cover what GET requests and POST requests means. So in modern applications, we use GET requests to retrieve something and POST requests to submit something. So in our case, fetching a quote from an external source like ZenQuotes would be a GET request. And informing the database that we want to store this data, a favorite quote inside our database, is like submitting data and it's pushing into the system. So it's a POST request. So if you want to retrieve data, you use GET requests, but if you want to submit data, you use POST requests. And in our case, we're going to use ZenQuotes. It's an external API, which is used for quote generation. And um, this is the link to the documentation. And let me show you what ZenQuotes looks like. So if I come out of here. So in this tab, this is the documentation for ZenQuotes. And if you look here, the basic API structure for ZenQuotes is this. So zenquotes.io/API, and then the mode will be specifying what we want. So in our case, we want a random quote, and then a key to specify our mode. So for example, if we look here, ZenQuotes API/random/mode, I'm going to just copy this URL and then I'm going to paste it in the browser and replace the mode with something like happy. And if you look here, this is the response from the API. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So this is giving us one random quote for the mode we provide. So if I send this one again, it will give me a different one. So the Q stands for quote, which will actually give us the quote. And A stands for the author of the quote, so which will also be useful for us. And the H is actually not relevant to us. It's actually formatting the quote for us, but I think Q and A are the most useful ones for us. And we're going to go over how to use the response of this API in our application. So I just showed you the API URL right now, and then you can provide a different mode too. So for our app, we had a different mode like calm. So this is a different quote and a different author. So every time we send a request, it will give us a random quote and a random author specific to our tag, which was calm. And one key thing to notice is if you want to use ZenQuotes extensively, they have something called an API key. But we're going to use that for Supabase. So I'm going to explain how that's done too. But the thing to remember is that you should keep your API keys and your environment file always secure and safe. You should not push them to Git. I'm going to show you how to use something called a git ignore file so that you can keep the file locally on your system, but you don't end up pushing it to GitHub. And I'll show you a simple setup to install database Supabase in our application. So the first step is going to the Supabase website and creating a new project. So I have Supabase open right here. So the link is supabase.com, and then the sign up is pretty straightforward. At the end of the lecture, I'll give you like a setup guide for Supabase as well. But once you have uh, logged in, it will show you the option of creating a new project. And then you go ahead and create a new project. In this case, I'm going to provide the name Mood Quote, and I'm going to ask to set up a strong password and create a new project. So what's happening right now is it is setting up our project right here called Mood Quote, and it has given us some information about our API keys. The next step would be essentially to connect these API keys to our code base. But before that, let's go back to our slides and see what the second step is. So we are going to get our API keys and add them to an environment file in our project's root folder. So let's go to Cursor, and in our project's root folder, I'm going to create a .environment file, and I'm going to toggle in the chat panel and open a new chat and say, for this environment file, I want to add Supabase API keys, which is project URL and ANN key. So this is what Mood Quote provides us. So once we have the project set up, what you can do is you can go to project settings, and inside project settings, you have data API, and you have your anon public key, and you have your secret service key. But the thing you need is right here in this connect tab. So if you click on connect and go to app frameworks, inside Next.js, which is our application that we're using, we have the Supabase URL for this project and the Supabase anon key. So I'm just going to copy this. This will be different for your code base. So if you copy this, it might not work, but you have to do the whole generation yourself. I'm going to just copy this and paste it inside this .environment file. So now it has the environment file and the necessary URLs for our application to interact with Supabase. What we're going to do next is we're going to set up a Supabase client in our project. So you can do it through code, or you can just ask Cursor to do it for you. So say I have added the Supabase config file. Let's install Supabase client for this Next.js app. So it's providing us the command. I'm just going to run it. Yep, so it has installed Supabase for us successfully, and we also have the configuration files here. So the next step in this one is creating a table to store data. So we want to be able to save our favorite quotes. So let me show you the state of our application right now. If I do npm run dev and open our application right here, So this is our application. It has happy, sad, energetic, calm, stressed. These are all the moods. I'm just going to select get quote, and a quote appears, and I want to favorite it, and I want it to be saved in a database. But right now, this quote is stored locally on our code base. So if we go here and we go under app API, and we have two routes, quotes and favorite. Favorite is to save it in the database. But if you look here, we're just logging the quote. We're not actually talking to database right now. And if you look in the quotes section, we have a route here, and we are getting the quote from our local storage. So what we need to do differently here is I'm going to link this file in this new chat and say, let's use the Zen quotes .io API to fetch quotes based on the user input for the mood. And I'm going to provide the API URL that we had earlier. And I'm going to copy it from our slides. And go back in the code base. So we don't need the add here. Yep. So let's see what changes it comes up with, because I feel like we'll have to refactor quite a bit. But while it's working on this, okay. Accept file. So if you look here, it has generated some quote for us, attempt to fetch a quote from zenquotes.io. But the thing is, it's not attaching the mode to us. So let's link to this and say it should append the mode input provided by the user to the API URL after random slash. Let's move forward with appending. Yep, so it's attached the mode for us now. Let's see if it actually works. Happy, sad, energetic, get quote. Yep, so it's pulling the quote from Zen quotes now, so that's great. If you want to confirm, you can look in like the server. So it's actually it's doing a get request. It's getting a quote on the basis of the mode selection we make. So we have one part of the problem solved where we're actually pulling the quote from the Zen quotes API, and we are not using like local storage. So ideally, the next step would be that once we hit favorite, it should be saved in our database. So before we do that, let's go back to our slides and let's look at what's the next step for the database. So we install the client. We need to create a table to store data. So I'm going to go back to Supabase, and I'm going to go to mood quote. I'm going to go to the database, we don't have any tables created yet. So I'm going to create a new table. Let's call this table favorites. So this will be just like our favorite quotes. I'm going to enable row level security. It's recommended. And let's add a few more relevant columns for this. So ID is a by default column. I would recommend using something called as UUID, which is a unique identifier. It just is a randomly generated ID, which is used in the industry. And what's relevant for us is the mood selection, the quote itself, and the author. So I'm going to add three more columns. So this one is mood. This is going to be a text. I'm going to add a quote. This will also be a text. And I'm going to add the author of the quote, which will also be text. And that's it. I'm going to go hit save. It's adding 5 columns to our database table. So we have ID created at mood, quote, and author. Okay, great. Now let's go back to our code base and let's inform the AI agent that we have set up the Supabase table for favorite quotes. And we want to update a different route now. So if you look here, this is the route, and it's only logging the quote. So we want to update this route with favoriting the quote. So I'm going to go to add route under favorite and say we have set up the Supabase table for favorite quotes. Let's add the functionality to save favorite quotes in the favorites table on Supabase. So it's looking for a client file which we don't have installed. So I'm going to inform it. Yes, we don't have it. We don't have. Okay, so it's trying to set it up without me informing it. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to accept it. And let's see where this file is. Yep. So now it has added the Supabase client. It's using the URL and the API keys we gave it. And it's also updated this file. Let's see what it has done. So it's now inserting in the favorites table and inserting quote and author. So we want to make sure that it is extracting it correctly. So let's go back to our UI and see what is happening. So if I go back here and if I select SAD, select get quote. So it's not being saved. It looks like there's an error. So yes, so it is saying new row violates row level security policy. So Supabase has a row level security policy, which we have to update. So this is good to know that we had an error here. So let's go back to Supabase and it's asking us to add row level security. I'm going to add row level security and create a policy which allows us to insert. So the key thing to notice here is we are trying to do an insert into the database. So I'm going to say insert and I'm just going to say true always. So true, and I'm going to say call this allowing inserts. and save policy. Okay, great. Let's go back to our application and see if it works now. Okay, so it says it has saved. Let's go back to our database and see if we have mode quote. Let's go to our database. Yeah, let's go to our tables. Let's go to favorite. Okay, so it looks like we have no rows. So let's say add the favorited quote to the database by pulling the quote and the author from the API response we get from Zen quotes. So I showed you earlier that we have to use we have to extract it from Q and A. A stands for author and Q stands for quote. So let's inform our AI agent that we're going to use that. Q for quote and A for author. Yes. Let's add logs in our server to check the flow. So what this will do is it will log every action we take on the API level. So I'm going to go back to my site. Let me say happy, get quote. It's getting the quote. It says saved. Now, if we go to our database, it looks like it has one row. Yep. So it has quote, but it is not pulling the mood and the author. So our quotes are being saved, but it's not pulling the mood and the author. So let's see what's going on. I'm gonna hit favorite saved. So it looks like it is parsing the quote, but it's not able to parse the author. So let's add this to chat and say, cannot parse author, use the mode selection used by the user for the response. So this will essentially provide the agent some enough context about how we can get both the quote and the mode. So let's say yes. So you're now fully set up to save the quote, author, and mode to your Supabase favorites tables. Okay, so it looks like it's done the backend logic for us. Let's try to test it. I'm gonna go select com, then get quote. And wow, it's providing us the author here as well. I'm gonna hit favorite, saved, and great. So it has parsed the quote, it has parsed the author, and it has also parsed the mode. Let's go back to our database and see. Let's refresh. Okay, great. So we have a row for it has com in the mode column, quote in the quote column, and the author in the author column. So this was so now our UI is connected to an API, which is also connected to a database. So I'm going to update now, so it should also populate with this code that I just favorited. Great, so it has the recent one too. So I think our function works end to end. And so what you should do now is if you look here, once we have finished and you can see the changes we've made. So we've installed Supabase, we've we've updated the favorite quote feature, we've updated the get quotes feature. Instead of using local storage, we've used the API, and we have set up a client for Supabase. So we should essentially push this to GitHub. So I'm just going to stage all of them right here. And we're going to generate a commit message using AI. And it says add Supabase integration for quote management. And then it gives us some details about what we did. I'm going to hit commit. And this I'm going to hit push. So this is essentially going to push all of our code to GitHub. And let me go back to my slides. Okay, so we have Supabase set up. We did a demo where the API was able to talk to Zen Quotes, which was an external source, and then we were also able to save the user's favorite quotes in a database. And you saw how little code I wrote. You can use AI to actually specify what APIs and what databases to use. And one key thing to notice is that you should always keep your API keys and environment files safe and secure. So let me also quickly show you that if you look here, the .environment file right here is actually hidden. So it's not highlighted, and this will always be local to your computer. But to make sure that you never push this to GitHub, there is a file in here called git ignore, which is basically informing GitHub that ignore all files with the extension of this file name. So if you look here, it has .env star. So it means that any files in this code base that start with the letters .env, they will not be pushed to GitHub. So it's important for us that this URL and these API keys always remain in our code base and never push to GitHub. So that's because if you push to GitHub, it is a security risk. But to make sure that it always is in your system, just add it to the git ignore file for files that you do not want to push to GitHub. And yeah, those were the key takeaways for the lesson on Thursday. We have how to plan and ship your application, given if you have an idea how to scope a specific feature, how to scope an MVP out, how to like think about features, flows, and like what would make it an MVP product and not a full stack scalable application, because you have to build in iterations. So we learn about that, and we'll also deploy it to Vercel, which is which will connect directly to your GitHub. So if once you've connected your project to your GitHub repo, you should be essentially able to push it to Vercel, and then that would give you a URL for anyone to access your site. And so the Supabase setup I did on this call today was pretty extensive, but if you want like a step-by-step setup for this, you can scan this QR code and you will have the guide for it. And um, how to set up Git and GitHub is also in the separate guide. And this one will have all the tools and technologies you need, like core core development tools like Cursor and Node.js and Git and GitHub. And yeah, this is our course that we're doing starting May 20th. So there's a $50 off coupon code, Lightning, for everyone. And yeah, thank you. If we have any questions, I'm open.